So, sort of an interesting topic to be talking about in a science parallel because the thrust of the subject is actually quite political. And it's also sort of, I'm not going to be saying anything that I think is that new, but what I wanted to kind of focus on is, how do I do this? So the idea of the controversy around vaping, and I wanted to approach it from a cultural angle. So there's always going to be, different disagreements between different groups on how to, say, regulate something or how to measure something or whatever. And I wanted to look at the sort of larger struggle between different groups in this space to sort of assert jurisdiction over the meaning of vaping products so that they can sort of solve the problems in the way that they want to around them. So the whole idea is to look at sort of, we've got a disruptive product that's come into an ecology between sort of tobacco control, tobacco, medical profession, and whatnot, and sort of take a look at the ecology of sort of this controversy. And so my talk here is part of a larger sort of comparative historical project where I am trying to, understand how vaping has disrupted the ecology of tobacco control, and it uses multi-methods, and it uses sort of comparisons. So first, like time comparisons. So one of my main research questions is, why do we have a vaping market today when the technology, or at least the idea and conceptualization of it is relatively old? So why did we get a vaping market in, 2005 that exploded into what it is versus why didn't we get that, in 1964 when someone patented a device that was quite similar to the one that spun off this? And then I also look at how things play out between, say, 2007 and present. Kind of try to put all of this into context and assess cause of some of this stuff and where stuff is coming from. Focus of my talk now is kind of looking at some examples of responses from sort of incumbents in the tobacco space, and sort of stuff that comes from industries, stakeholders, academics, scientists, and I'm in particular looking to understand how these lessons from the tobacco industry's past are applied in this space in sort of a political way. I chose to focus this mostly on material that is geared at a professional audience. I think that we sort of see a lot of stuff in the media, but sort of I'm going to focus some of my talk on stuff that would be being presented, say, at a conference, or that maybe only sort of certain people would see, so not necessarily mass media stuff, but more directed at people kind of on the inside and in the professions. So why is it important to look at the culture of controversy around vaping? And my sort of argument is that how you understand something or how you get people to understand a problem is going to have implications for how you solve that problem. And so these decisions obviously have implications for individual well-being, for public health, and for social welfare. With vaping, we have a situation where how it gets defined, how the problem gets shaped, that's who gets to solve it. So one of the big disruptive things about vaping is that it interrupts how we've been thinking about how to solve the smoking problem. All of a sudden, smokers just started doing it themselves. And they built an industry. And then when they couldn't get their products into convenience stores, or when this started happening, they built a distribution system. And there's this whole thing that sort of grew. And so I sort of argue that, we need to look at it to some extent. We need to look at the, not just competing interests like conflicts of interest, but we need to look at the competition around this and sort of look kind of honestly at how this does disrupt a whole range of things that were being done before, and see some of the reaction to it in that context. So I just want to go back to 2009. Focus of my research is mostly American, even though I'm not. So 2009, when the sort of first media reports on vaping came out. And we have a lot of sort of established groups. Some of them do very good work. And some of them have said some sort of odd things about vaping. But so I just want to look at some of the things that were being said in 2009 when we didn't have any data on this and we didn't have any sort of whatever. So I have, this is from the Truth Initiative well, not the Truth Initiative, from Cheryl Hilton when she was working there as the director. So on NBC Nightly News. And I just wanted to kind of point out that a lot of these talking points that are such a problem today, at least for the industry, they were around as soon as people started talking about vaping. And so this is actually from the first FDA press conference from American Academy of Pediatrics speaker. And again, you see like normalization of smoking, bubblegum flavors, they come in mint, they this and that. This is when like an e-cigarette was sold in like 100 kiosks in the United States, and they were like $80 for one of them. And I mean, it's not that the fear of, you know, young people using something is legitimate per se, but just to sort of give you an idea, this is not like a big product and there's no data on it. It's very expensive and it's kind of weird. So this is, I just sort of found this odd. And this is from the director of the Office of Smoking Health at the CDC, same press conference. And basically, this, you start to see that already. The CDC Office on Smoking and Health is positioning themselves, like I always look at discourse, because I'm a sociologist, they're discursively positioning themselves to treat this as a tobacco product, which is very interesting because it was before the FDA decided to treat them as such. But so yeah, countering the impact of smoke-free laws, and I found the end of his speech kind of interesting because it really sort of harkens back to you know, the kind of like the thrust of the tobacco conflict. Beforehand, we need to protect our youth, and many dangers can come from the seduction and influence of any form of tobacco use, simulated or real. And this is when there's a very novel product. No one's decided regulatory, like from a regulatory or from anything that it is tobacco, but it's just already sort of like the meaning is being shaped in that context. So I'm not going to go over everything that people probably know better than me, but we do know at a population level, we've got massive declines in youth smoking and in smoking in general. Regular use of e-cigarettes by never smoking youth is extremely rare. But most of our policies and our discussions around them are justified by this idea that they will help protect children. And the argument usually against them is that you're taking away what adults are using to quit smoking with. And so there's this precautionary principle thing. And so, yes. So I'm just going to get into sort of where this is coming from. And I'm going to get into the particular sort of talking point because we have a product that, I mean, everyone sort of acknowledges is much safer than cigarettes. And we have factual evidence now, like we do have statistics showing that it's not really being used by young people. And so at this point, to get through some of these laws that you wouldn't have for products that are of a similar risk profile, other strategies need to be used. This came out in 2013 from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. On their blog. I won't go through the whole thing, but this is actually sort of, to me, this is sort of a typical treatment of the vaping industry. It's like, we're gonna hold up some pictures next to each other and show like, oh, it's just like big tobacco. And this one goes through, you know, some pictures that do look the same. And it's sort of like, hey, they're copying big tobacco's playbook. And I find this kind of funny coming from the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids because I do historical research and I've looked into, you know, what they've been involved in up to this, and they know the tobacco playbook quite well because they were involved in kind of beating them, and they know that it's not an advertising strategy, it's a public relations strategy. And so that's where I'm going to kind of turn to now, is public relations, which is what the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids is engaged with. And here's like a later example of that, where we've got, you know, e-cigarette flavors, over 700 flavors. This is from a 2016 video. What did I do there? 2016 video on like 7 tricks big tobacco is using to hook your kids. So basically, yeah, the whole discourse of big tobacco is there and always conflated with these like weird products that go into $100 e-cigarettes, like e-liquid. But, you know, putting it out there as if it's like a little cigar that's $2.99 at a, you know, convenience store. So, yeah, that's what I kind of wanted to just sort of bring back up. I mean, people do know this, some don't, but that when we talk about the tobacco playbook, we're not actually talking about Big Tobacco's playbook. They made it famous, but it's a PR playbook. And they, you know, the history is that they used PR in-house and large PR companies to shape a public perception of smoking in their favor so they could pressure legislators to delay action that would harm them. And so that's what we're talking about when we talk about the playbook. And I'll tell you, as somebody that hangs out around the vaping industry and actually just following, you know, a presentation from somebody in the vaping industry, very good, talking about, you know, this is what people are saying about us. This is not an industry that is employing Edelman and all of these giant PR firms to spin them, because they'd look a lot better in the public eye if they were. Really, because the vaping industry is so consumer-driven, most of the time, a lot of them thought, well, we can just trust that people will do good research and say honest things about us, and that so far hasn't happened. So I just want to get into a couple of like small examples from America. This is from a presentation made to Chicago City Council in 2014 by Bikara Shukar, who was the Commissioner of Public Health at the time. This is when they were trying to define vaping as a tobacco product. And basically, he stood up in his testimony and he said to people on the committee, you know, who do you trust? And this is after he had tried to pass the bill earlier that year, and it got derailed by a bunch of vapors who called their politicians and said, you know, don't do this harms me. And so he went up, and the focus of his testimony changed from the first time that they had the meeting to one that was really focused on trust and on sort of who the people were that were fighting this. And so you can just, these are actually his slides. And so, you know, federally adjudicated racketeers under RICO. I don't know that the tobacco, I'm still trying to get a list of the people that actually testified there. The only kind of clue I had was when I watched the alderman speak during the vote, which did pass. Was one of them who actually voted in favor of the ordinance still said, you know, I'm kind of angry at the commissioner for, you know, saying that people were charged under the Racketeering Act when all I saw were consumers and small businesses. So this was sort of the narrative that it got passed. When it was being voted on, a lot of aldermen gave speeches on not making the mistakes of the past, and, you know, we've got to be on the right side of history of this one. Interestingly, this event got written up in a study that the commissioner and the public health department staff authored with some academics. It was a bad study, I won't get into it. They made a lot of mistakes, they misinterpreted their data, but it's been used in a way to sort of legitimize this idea that we have some kind of like a front AstroTurf campaign here. And here's an example of it on the California Tobacco Free Facebook page, where they are going on about, oh, we've just found new evidence that, all of this opposition to our campaigns must be AstroTurf. It's a highly organized group of objectors. This is another slide from someone who isn't me. It's a slide from a presentation to California public health people, where they set up the presentation as like sort of it was called The Game, and it was a chess game, and it was our move, their move, and it was talking about how to beat vapors at politics. Which is, it's kind of funny because vapors aren't very well funded and do a pretty good job for not having very many resources at all. But this was a slide talking about, earned media and placements. And so we see, these 3 placements, and it's under a strategy. Ricardo, how am I for time?
2 minutes.
Okay. So, yeah, so we have basically placements in the news about vaping. And this isn't by accident. This is groups going in or getting their PR firms to go in and place these stories. So I guess I just wanted to, I'll wrap it up, and just to tie it into science, when I came to this project, it was to study what the technology can tell us about smoking, because it's a developing technology, so it isn't settled now, and it's really neat to see people problem solve with it, because you can start to learn new things about what keeps people smoking, because it's smokers that were developing the technology. And it was really hard to do that work because of the politics around it, and because, to be perfectly honest, it was going to go away. And I had to sort of step back and take a look at where this was coming from. And so I just wanted to end on this. This is a slide from E6 Summit, from one of the presenters there. This picture was actually used twice. It's a propaganda image. And I guess I just wanted to sort of end with the fact that we should probably think about how comfortable we are with all this propaganda in our knowledge space. There can be good PR, there can be duplicitous PR, and I think for the scientific community, part of our job is to sort of separate ourselves from at least the politics of that, or be very transparent about what we're doing and the context of what gets said. And yeah, I'll just leave it with that. So thank you very much.